Hello and welcome back to another full step-by-step PC build guide, and today I'm going to be showing you how to build a PC in the latest case from Lian Li. This is the Lancool 217. Now Lian Li say this case combines the CPU cooling of the Lancool 216 with the GPU cooling of the Lancool 207, and of course they're throwing a little bit of wood in as well. If you see any parts you like, you'll find links to everything that I've used in the description, so let's make a start by taking a detailed look at the case. To remove our tempered glass side panel, there's a little notch at the back you can get your fingers into. Simply pop it out from the top and then lift up and away. And our other side panel is removed in exactly the same way. Pop it out from the top and then lift up and away. And you'll notice at the bottom of this panel we've got this vented area, which is to provide a source of airflow for our bottom mounted fans. We can go ahead and remove one of the case accessory boxes. You'll notice we've got this walnut trim which extends all the way around our front panel and also on the both sides of the case. Our I/O is on the side where we've got a power button, a combined headphone and microphone jack, two USB Type A ports and a single Type C port. But if we take a look at the top of the case, you'll notice that we've also got a power button up here. In this case, it has two power buttons, one at the top and one on the side. To remove our top panel, it can simply be popped up from the back and lifted off and away. We've got a removable fan stroke radiator bracket at the top of the case, and on this bracket you're able to mount up to 3 120mm fans or up to 2 140mm fans. In terms of radiator support, it's up to a 360mm radiator up to a maximum thickness of 85mm, or a 280mm radiator up to a maximum thickness of 60mm. To remove the bracket, there's two screws at the side you're going to need to remove, and then the bracket can be tilted up and lifted away. Our case's mesh front panel can simply be popped out from the top and then lifted up and away. Out of the box we've just got mesh at the front, but in the case accessory box you do get this dust filter. It simply clips into place at the bottom and then can be pushed into place. So you've got your choice, you can go with just mesh or add a dust filter in. Our mesh panel removed, you can see that Lian Li have pre-installed two 170mm fans at the front. Now these fans are spaced out. You've got one at the bottom to provide plenty of cooling for your GPU and one towards the top to provide cooling for your CPU. But it is possible to move both these fans towards the top if you want to maximize your CPU cooling. So the first thing you're going to need to do is remove the two panels. We've got one here, there's a little clip on the right hand side and it can be freed up. And then there's one between the two fans. You are going to be able to move these fans toollessly. So the first thing you're going to do is lift the fans up, and that is then going to free them up to be able to remove them from the case. So take a look at the back of our fans. You can see in each corner we've got one of these little rubber pads secured with a screw. And then you can see on the frame of the case we've got a number of different positions you can install it in. The little rubber pad's going to go through the large hole, and then when you pull it down it locks in this smaller hole. So we can just move the fan up to the top position, push it into place and then pull down to lock it. Our bottom fan we just need to pull up, pull forward to free it up. And I'm just noticing to be able to fit this in we're actually going to have the top fan pushed all the way to the top. That's going to allow us to get the bottom fan pushed into place, and then we can push the bottom fan down, and then once the bottom fan's in we're able to push the top fan down, and then all we need to do is replace the plastic covers. So in this position with both fans towards the top, Lian Li say this should improve your CPU cooling. If you'd rather have a balanced cooling for your GPU and CPU, just leave it in the original configuration. If for some reason you'd rather go with 120 or 140mm fans at the front, this is possible. So first thing you're going to want to do is remove the fans and the covers, and then you're going to need to remove the frame for the front panel. It can simply be pulled off from the front. So because we've got all our I/O cables connected, you're not going to be able to fully remove this front frame. Then in the case accessory box we get two of these brackets, one for each side. So if we take a look at the frame, you'll notice that we've got two screw holes on it. And then if we take a look at our bracket, you'll notice there's two different screw holes depending on whether you want 120 or 140mm fans. So for 120mm fans, you're going to use the screw hole closest towards the edge of the bracket, which is going to keep the brackets further in towards the middle. For 140mm fans, you're going to install it in this position here. And then you're going to use the screws with a rounded head to secure the two brackets into place. So that's what it looks like set up for 140mm fans using the inner screw hole in each bracket. And then if we use the outer screw hole in each bracket, it's going to move the inner brackets together so they're perfectly set up for three 120mm fans. The problem with this is there's nowhere else to put those 170mm fans that Lian Li include. They're only going to fit at the front. So I imagine most people are just going to leave the case in the stock position, which I'm going to put it back to. At the rear of the case, Lian Li have installed another 140mm non-RGB fan set to exhaust. If you prefer, it is possible to mount a 120mm fan here. Our final two out of the 5 pre-installed case fans are mounted at the bottom. These are reverse blade fans and they're set to intake, where they're going to bring plenty of cool air into our graphics card. And like all the other fans in this case, these are non-ARGB PWM fans. So while Lian Li have installed two 120mm fans at the bottom, the maximum fan support is up to three 120mm fans. Although there may not be much point because your power supply is going to be mounted directly below this grill. So if you do want to go with an extra fan, you're going to need to remove this grill. It's held on with two screws at the front, and then you're going to be able to lift the grill up, pull it forward to remove it. So taking a look at the bottom, you can see we've got similar mounting holes to what we have at the front, and our pre-installed case fans are mounted in exactly the same way. So to remove them, you're simply going to push them backwards, and then they can be lifted up. If we turn the fans round, see that at each corner we've got a rubber mount secured with a screw. So in terms of the rubber pads, in the case you get two different sizes. The big ones are for mounting fans, and the small ones are for mounting drives. And there's four different sizes of these hard drive screws that you're going to use to secure the fans to the rubber mounts. Now there's two smaller sizes and they're for drives, one for 2.5 inch and one for 3.5 inch, but it's these larger ones that you're going to use for the fans. So you'll notice these screws are of different lengths, and it depends what sort of fans you're going to want to mount at the bottom. If you're going with standard 25mm fans, it's these shorter screws that you're going to use to mount them. If you're using Lian Li Uni fans, which are slightly thicker, 28mm thick, it's these larger screws that you're going to want to use. So I'll show you with Lian Li Uni fans. So we can set a rubber mount onto each corner, and the little thin side, which is going to secure into the case, is sitting up the way. So we'll pop it down through the rubber pad and we can secure them into place. Then you're just going to be able to line your fan up with the brackets. It's going to push down through the holes, and then you just need to pull it forward to get it to lock into place. So you can see the Lian Li Uni fans are slightly thicker than these standard fans, and it wouldn't make a lot of sense to add just one single fan into place at the bottom. And Lian Li do include enough of these longer screws. If you wanted to add 3 Uni fans at the bottom, you could do this. And again, to make sure our bottom mounted fans have plenty of cool air, we've got this mesh panel on this side of the case as well. It is removable. We've got a thumb screw on the back, which we can loosen. Then we can pull the panel backwards and tilt it out and lift up to remove it. Motherboard support in this case is absolutely massive, and you can actually fit server motherboards up to a maximum width of 330mm. In terms of more standard motherboard mounting options, if you want to go with an ATX motherboard, you can see we've got additional cutouts for back connector motherboards. And again, with micro ATX, we've got additional cutouts for back connector motherboards as well. If you want to go with an air cooler, the maximum height supported is up to 180mm. So if you want to go with any motherboard larger than ATX, you are going to have to modify this I/O bracket. So the I/O bracket is held on with 3 screws, and then with the 3 screws removed, we can simply tilt the bracket out and remove it from the case. Now, what you'll notice is this rubber grommet is closer to this side of the bracket, but if we were to rotate the bracket round, this rubber grommet is then going to be further towards the front of the case, making space for an ATX motherboard. The only problem with turning this round is our GPU support bracket is now reversed. So to remove the GPU support bracket, it's held on with 4 screws at the back. We can then move the GPU support bracket round to this side and again secure it in from the back. So then we can slide the bracket back into place and we'll secure it with the 3 screws. So what you'll notice now, the GPU support bracket and also this rubber grommet have moved further towards the front of the case. So we take a look at our last lot of standoffs, you're going to have additional space over here for eATX motherboards up to a maximum width of 280mm. If you do want to go with a larger motherboard, you're just going to have to remove this panel. And with the panel removed, you can now accommodate motherboards up to a maximum width of 330mm, and you're still going to have this additional row of rubber grommets to pass all your cables through to the back. At the rear of the case, we've got 7 horizontal PCI expansion slot brackets, and in terms of graphics card support, the maximum length supported is up to 380mm. To use the GPU support bracket, there's a thumb screw at the back you're going to need to loosen, and then you're going to be able to slide the GPU support bracket up to where it supports your graphics card, and then all you need to do is tighten the thumb screw at the back to secure it. If you're interested in mounting your graphics card vertically, you'll be pleased to hear this bracket is rotatable. It's held on with 4 screws. Then with the 4 screws removed, you are able to rotate the bracket around 90 degrees and re-secure it with the 4 screws. And you can see all the slots are now vertical, and great to see they're going to be well away from the tempered glass panel. So taking a look at the bottom of where these slots come out to, your only issue is going to be that you're not going to be able to have these fans installed here with your graphics card mounted vertically, but Lian Li have a solution for this. And that is that it is possible to move these fans from the top of the bracket and mount them underneath. So I have freed our fan cables up at the back, so to remove the fans, all we need to do is push them backwards and remove them. So as well as moving our fans to the bottom, we're also going to need to move them closer to the front to make space for our riser cable at the rear of the case. So all we need to do is insert this little bracket that comes in the case accessory box, lower it down, and we'll secure in place with one of the screws with the rounded head. So all we're going to need to do is move the mounting brackets to the other side of the fans. We can then turn our fans around and fix the brackets to the other side. So then we can just bring the fans in from the underside. We'll line the rubber mounts up with the holes and push them into place. And then same thing with our second fan. And then we get another panel in the case accessory box, which can simply slot into place. And again, we'll secure it with one of the screws with the rounded head. So you'll notice our additional panel has 2 screw holes in it, and we also have 2 screw holes on the original panel. And these are for mounting the standoffs for securing your riser cables. There's 2 different positions you're going to have the riser cable in. So all you're going to do is take the long standoffs that come in the case accessory box, pick the position you want to put them in, and screw them into place. And in the case accessory box, we do get the standoff insertion and removal tool, which can go over the top and help you insert them. So if you wanted to go with a vertical GPU, the only additional thing you're going to need to pick up is a riser cable. You're going to secure it to the 2 standoffs using the screw with a little lip around the outside, and that's the same screw you're going to use to secure your motherboard to the case. So although the fans look really clean recessed at the bottom of the case, there is a reason that Lian Li have installed them at the top, and that is because there is 2 major limitations of mounting the fans down like this. The first is with the fans extending down into this compartment at the bottom, you're not going to be able to use the hard drive cages that come in the case accessory box. I'll show you these later on. And the second thing is, because the fans extend all the way over to here, you're not going to be able to mount your power supply in the traditional position with the plug cable going into the back of the case, and you're going to have to use the side mount that Lian Li have here. So this brings us on to our power supply, and there's 2 different orientations that you can install your power supply in. So out of the box, Lian Li are wanting you to install it sideways on, and they include this power extension cable, which you can simply plug into your power supply. And then the little mesh panel is going to cover this over. So we take a look in from the other side of the case, you can see the reason why Lian Li are doing this. You're going to have easy access to all the ports in your power supply for plugging cables into it. And in this orientation, the maximum length of power supply supported is up to 180 millimeters. It is also impossible to install your power supply in the standard orientation, and to do this you're going to need to remove this plate at the back. It's held on with 4 screws. You can then move the plate from the back to the side of the case and secure it with the 4 screws. And you'll see in this position you're then able to screw your power supply straight in from the back and plug your power cable directly into the power supply without needing to use this extension cable. So the advantages of doing this is you are able to install longer power supplies. In this position you can install power supplies up to a maximum length of 220 millimeters. Although there's a few downsides. The first is it's not going to be as easy to plug your cables in. You might say that's not such a big deal, but there is a couple of other problems. The first is you're only going to be able to install 1 hard drive cage at the bottom instead of 2. And if you want to go with your graphics card vertically, you're not going to be able to move the fans down to the bottom compartment with the power supply installed at the back. We've got a dust filter over our power supply's intake, and it can simply be pulled out from the back for cleaning. The other thing you're going to notice is that apart from where our power supply is going to go, the bottom of the case is pretty much solid. We've just got these cutouts for mounting our drive trays at the bottom. So that's the reason why we've got 2 perforated areas at the bottom on the side to give our bottom mounted fans a source of air intake. Taking a look at the other side of the case, cable management looks like it should be pretty good. We've got these rows of Velcro cable straps for helping manage our cables, and at the rear of the case we've got these little plastic clips which we can keep our cables behind. Take a look up at the top, we've got this PWM fan hub, and we can see our 5 pre-installed case fans are already connected up to it, and there is 1 spare PWM port. Despite the fact that we don't have ARGB on any of our fans, we've actually got 4 ARGB ports on this hub. So great if you're wanting to add ARGB devices into the build. We are going to have full motherboard control for this hub. Just plug the PWM cable into a fan header on your motherboard and the ARGB cable into a header on your motherboard for all the ports to work. But just don't forget to plug the SATA cable into your power supply or the hub won't work. We've got 2 dedicated 2.5-inch drive mounting brackets behind the motherboard. To remove the drive brackets, there's a thumb screw at the top you're going to need to remove, and the bracket can be tilted out and lifted up and away. You're going to set your 2.5-inch drive into place, and you're going to secure it with 4 of the screws with a little lip around the outside. And then you're going to turn the bracket to the case and secure it using the thumb screw. It is also possible to mount a drive in the main body of the case. You're just going to need to remove this additional panel at the bottom, and then you're going to take the smaller rubber pads and push them through the holes. You can set your 2.5-inch drive into place with the I/O facing towards the back, and then you're going to use the 2.5-inch drive screws to secure it into place. And that's what it's going to look like with the drive installed in the main body of the case. So in the case accessory box, we get 2 of these hard drive cages. Inside we get 1 drive tray, which can simply be pulled out from the front. So this drive tray will accommodate both a 2.5-inch and 3.5-inch drive. So we're going to mount the 2.5-inch drive on the underside of the drive tray. So we turn it over and we'll set our 2.5-inch drive into place. And we're going to secure it with 4 of the screws with a little lip around the outside. You'll notice the screw holes at the bottom are recessed. They're not going to get in the way of our 3.5-inch drive mounting. And we've got little pins on the side which is going to secure our 3.5-inch drive. So it's just a matter of lining the drive up with the pins and just pushing it down into place to secure it in the drive tray. We can then secure our drive in the drive tray. And you'll notice then on the top of the drive tray we have mounting for either a 3.5-inch, these outer holes, or a 2.5-inch drive. So what you're going to do is secure the correct drive screws and rubber pads to the bottom of your drive. We can line it up with the right holes in the top of the hard drive cage and then push it into place to secure our drive. So in each of these drive trays you're going to be able to fit a 3.5-inch and 2.5-inch drive in the drive tray, and on top it's either a 2.5-inch or 3.5-inch drive. So when it comes to securing our drives at the bottom, we have a range of different slots for securing the drive trays. For 2 drive trays, you're going to install it all the way towards the front. Just a matter of lining the drive tray up with the cutouts beneath, and then you're going to push it forward, and it's going to lock into place. To remove it, you simply lift this lever up and pull forward, and that's going to let you take it out again. And then we'll set our second drive tray into place. Lian Li do recommend if you're transporting the case that you secure the drive cages at the bottom using the round-headed screws. Each drive cage is going to be secured with 2 screws. And if you're only wanting to go with 1 drive cage, and remember if you're installing your power supply in the standard orientation, you're only going to be able to fit 1 drive cage in place because the cables are going to be coming out here. You can have it all the way to the front or 1 slot back. We're now ready to start working on our motherboard, where we're going to be installing our CPU, the bracket for our CPU cooler, our M.2 SSD and our RAM before we put the motherboard into the case. To open the socket cover, we need to push this lever down and out to bring it all the way to the middle of the motherboard, and then we can open the socket cover up. Holding the CPU by the edges and making sure the text is the correct way up, we're going to lower it carefully down into the socket. Then we can close the socket cover down again, and as we close the lever, the black bit of plastic will pop off, and we'll put it in our motherboard box for safekeeping. To install the bracket for our CPU cooler, we're first going to need to remove the stock clips. They're each held on with 2 screws. Then we can insert the brackets for our CPU cooler. And you'll notice that each of these brackets has a little arrow on them pointing towards the CPU, so make sure you put them on the correct way round. And then we can secure the brackets using the 4 original screws. Because we've got a Gen 5 M.2 SSD, we're going to need to install it in the top slot. The heatsink is held on with 2 screws. We can then insert our M.2 SSD into the socket, and as we flatten it down, this little clip's going to hold it in place. We need to remove the plastic protection from the back of the heatsink, and we can then replace our heatsink. We're going to be installing our RAM in the 2nd and 4th slot along from the CPU, so I'll go ahead and open the clips on these slots. Then we can line our RAM up with this slot, and once we're happy everything's lined up, it's just some firm pressure to the top, and it's going to clip into place. And then it's the same thing with our 2nd stick. Next we can insert the motherboard into the case, lining it up with the standoffs at the back. And this middle standoff is elongated, so once it goes through the hole in the middle of the motherboard, it's going to help hold our motherboard in place. You can then secure the motherboard to the case using 9 of the screws with a little lip around the outside from the case accessory box. Next we've got our case cables to plug in. Our HD audio cable is going to go into this header down the bottom left hand side of the motherboard. So we'll bring the cable through the cutout, and we're going to plug it in with the audio text facing up the way. We've got an ARGB header here, so I'm going to bring the ARGB cable coming from our hub through and get it plugged in. And next to it we've got a system fan header, so I'm going to bring the PWM cable through and get it plugged in. Front panel connectors are going to go into this header here, so we'll bring the cable through and we're going to plug it in with the front panel text facing up the way. Then we've got our front panel USB type A header, which is here, so we'll bring the cable through the cutout and push into place. And then the header directly above it is for our front panel type C cable. So again, bring the cable through, line it up, and push into place. We're now ready to install our power supply, and I've gone ahead and plugged the cables in that we're going to need. So I plugged a 12 volt 2x6 cable to power our graphics card. I plugged in 2 8-pin EPS cables to provide additional power to our CPU, a SATA power cable to power our fan and ARGB hub, and our 24-pin motherboard cable. Next, we're going to take our power supply with its intake fan facing down the way, and we're going to slide it into place at the bottom. We can secure the power supply to the case using 4 of the large power supply screws from the case accessory box. We can then bring our power supply cable extension round and into place and get it plugged into the power supply. And then we'll just tuck the excess cable up. So once we install our side panel, we're not going to have access to this button, so we're going to want to make sure we turn our power supply power button to on. And our power supply features a smart zero fan mode, so whenever the power supply is under low load, its fan will stop spinning, helping reduce noise in the build. So I'm also going to turn this to on. And then we can replace the mesh panel. Our EPS cables are going to go into these 2 headers at the top left of the motherboard. So we'll bring our cables in through the cutout, line them up with the motherboard, and push into place. And then we'll just pull all the excess cable through to the back. And our 24-pin cable is going to go into this header here. So we'll bring the cable through the cutout, line it up with the header, and push into place. And again, just pull all the excess cable through to the back. Then we just need to plug the SATA cable coming from our fan and ARGB hub into the SATA cable coming from our power supply. We can set our case's top fan stroke radiator bracket on top of our AIO, and we'll secure it using the short radiator screws. So I did try lining it up a few different ways, and I wasn't able to get all the screw holes to come through. There is little bits of metal blocking 2 of the screw holes, but it will be perfectly fine held on with 10 screws. So we can remove the plastic protection from our cold plate. And then Lian Li have a little plastic sticker you can apply over the top. So you'll notice the sticker has lots of little cutouts on it, and this is to get your thermal paste in the correct pattern. So we can then add some thermal paste. Just going to apply it over the little cutouts. And then we can take the spreader and spread the thermal paste. So then if I remove the plastic protection, we've got our thermal paste applied to our cold plate. I'm just going to pass the fan cable coming from the fans and the radiator through to the back. Then I'm going to line the bracket up at the top, and then we can just lower our AIO down and into place. We'll secure the bracket using the 2 original screws, and we can replace our case's top panel. I'm just going to route the cables coming from the bottom of our pump up around the side of the cold plate, and then we just need to line the pump up with the bracket on the motherboard, and then we just need to tighten up each corner in turn. Our AIO pump header is this header in the middle at the top of the motherboard. I'm just going to plug the PWM cable coming from our pump into it. And then I'm just going to route the excess cable through to the back. Likewise, I'm just going to route our ARGB cable through to the back. And then at the back, we can take our ARGB cable and plug it into our ARGB hub. If you prefer, you could of course plug it directly into an ARGB header on the motherboard. And our CPU fan header is this one here at the top right of the motherboard. So we'll bring the PWM cable from the fans and the radiator through and get it plugged in. If the logo in the center isn't straight, it is removable. It just simply pulls off. And you'll notice you've got a whole range of different holes, so it's just a matter of twisting it round to get it to straight and pushing it back into place. So I'm just going to remove the plastic protection. We'll pop this in straight and again remove the plastic protection. Next we've got our graphics card to install, and we're going to need to remove the second and third expansion slot cover from the top. Next we can go ahead and line our graphics card up with a slot. And once we have everything's lined up, it's just some firm pressure and the graphics card is going to clip into place. And we'll go ahead and secure it with the 2 screws we've just removed. Next, I'm just going to slide our GPU support bracket up to where I'm happy it's supporting our graphics card, and then we can tighten up the thumb screw at the back. Not the easiest for me to get you a good shot of this, but one very important step you're always going to want to take with a GPU support bracket is check that your fans can spin freely and it's not obstructing the fans from spinning, which it isn't. We can then bring our 12V 2x6 cable through the cutout at the bottom, line it up with our graphics card, and push into place. And again, we're just going to check that our fans can spin without catching on the cable, which they can. Okay, last thing to do is some cable management and get the panels back on again. Okay, so that's the build complete. If you don't know how to set the PC up, I've made another video that covers setting the PC up after you've built it, and you'll find a link to that video in the description. I'm going to do a bit of thermal testing now, and then I'm going to be back with a case review. So you want to find out what I think of the Lancool 217, you're going to want to check out that video, and I'll put a link to it in the description. If you have enjoyed this full step-by-step PC build guide, please remember to give it a thumbs up, and if you're not currently subscribed to the channel, please hit the subscribe button as well.